A group of soldiers took guard around the entirely golden giant egg, but they didn't notice a few strange-looking unknown creatures quietly crawling out. No one expected that this giant egg was laid by extraterrestrial beings. As for what it will hatch into, and what impact it will have on Earth, Dr. Sandra, a genetics biologist, is equally curious. Following the coordinates previously provided, she and security consultant George were the first to find the crash site of the giant egg. The scene before them made their eyes lion. The giant egg emitted a soft golden light, its shell covered with a nearly transparent film. Sandra couldn't help but raise her hand, slowly reaching into the transparent film. Her body trembled slightly, as if she felt a surge of bioelectricity. At this moment, the war of courage came from afar. Realizing from was a Persian, Sandra quickly extracted a vial of the mucus seeping from the giant egg. Then she and George slipped into the dense forest. Not long after, military soldiers arrived at the scene in great numbers, sealing off the area around the giant egg tightly. Dr. Morgan, a biology professor from Stockholm University, personally led the team, using various advanced equipment to conduct a comprehensive examination of the giant egg. The final data shocked everyone. This giant egg weighs 120 tons, yet despite falling from such a height, it sustained no damage and left no crater on the ground, as it had tangential crashed on. Moreover, the energy contained within the giant egg is equivalent to the total of tens of thousands of nuclear power plants, enough to meet the energy needs of most countries. Even more astonishing is that this energy requires no conversion and can be used just by being near it. Dr. Morgan's eyes lit up. If this technology could be mastered, humanity's energy crisis would be completely resolved. Meanwhile, George had already driven back to the city, and Sandra was eager to analyze the composition of the egg liquid. The two parted ways again, and George returned to the government building to report yesterday's experience in detail to the female prime minister. However, he couldn't explain how he briefly communicated with the alien entity. If it hadn't stopped at the coordinates he provided, George would have preferred to believe it was a surreal dream. However, upon learning about the peculiarities of the giant egg, the female prime minister no longer cared about the so-called alien entity. She decided to temporarily form a research committee, with the aim of fully mastering the energy technology of the giant egg before other countries could react. For this, the female prime minister set aside past grievances and, on George's recommendation, brought Sandra into the research team. The two hurried to the site. Upon seeing Professor Morgan, Sandra quickly went up to ask, "Have you seen the mushroom photos I sent you?" Morgan shrewdly sent, pretending to be puzzled, and sent he and too busy to check his phone. Just as they were about to go see the giant egg, Sandra was stopped by the guards, who said her clearance was insufficient. Sandra, helpless, could only go to a nearby body of water to collect some samples, but she didn't notice that beneath the dense dry grass, a strange life form was slowly wriggling. Returning to the laboratory, Sandra carefully compared the samples under the microscope, and the results left her extremely shocked. The samples collected yesterday showed almost no signs of cell division, but today's samples had an astonishingly fast cell division rate, as if the fast-forward button had been pressed. Even more surprising, the samples contained uncontaminated deoxyribonucleic acid, a completely new biological gene never before seen on Earth. George planned to report the findings to Dr. Morgan, but Sandra immediately stopped him. She had completely lost trust in her teacher. Previously, Sandra had sent photos of the sewer mushrooms to Morgan, but he pretended not to know, and he also intentionally deprived Sandra of the authority to research the giant egg, clearly guarding against something. George nodded, thinking it made sense, and encouraged Sandra to continue her research, promising to provide as much convenience as possible. After returning home, Sandra didn't dare to delay for a moment and continued researching the mucus samples from the giant egg. This time, she made an even more astonishing discovery. The unknown biological cells in the sample would divide and reproduce at an incredible speed in the dark, but once exposed to light, this division process would immediately stop. After grasping this key characteristic, Sandra could no longer hold back and rushed overnight to the giant egg's restricted area for an on-site investigation. She speculated these giant corners might be hiding lesions of unknown species. It turned out Sandra was absolutely right. Under a cluster of tree roots, she unexpectedly hatched a completely unknown creature. Sandra was instantly captivated by the cute appearance, and took it upon herself to bring the little one home, determined to personally observe its growth patterns. However, what Sandra didn't know was that deep in the forest of the restricted area, numerous alien larvae were clinging to a corpse, seemingly sucking nutrients frantically. Unknowingly, 2 days passed, and during this time, Sandra didn't go anywhere, continuously caring for the alien infant she had picked up. At first, she just fed it some yogurt and vegetable leaves, and the little creature grew well. However, in the past half day, it suddenly stopped growing, and even its spirit became listless. Sandra was so anxious she scratched her head, unable to figure out what went wrong. She couldn't possibly take it to a pair hospital, could she? On the highway not far from the restricted area, a woman was driving, energetically focused on the road ahead. Suddenly, the car shook, and she instinctively had the reds. Feeling like she had hit something, the woman lit up her phone and got out to check, discovering a series of strange small footprints in the snow. Following the light, a ghastly pale face suddenly appeared. Terrified, the woman ran back to the car, finding the passenger door open. Looking through the car window, she saw another alien creature draped in clothing standing by the roadside. For a time, major media outlets rushed to report that many people had seen alien creatures in the forest. The international community collectively focused on the. Some people thought they were cute and harmless, while others fell into panic, believing this was a sign of an alien invasion. The female prime minister is recently overwhelmed with work. She hadn't expected some alien juvenile to break through the blockade. The honey previously found in the forest actually died of a heart attack and had no connection to the alien creature. However, the outside world is unaware of this, and panic spread like wildfire, difficult to control once ignited. The authority dispatched more personnel to search for the escaped alien entities and relocate them to an abandoned building. Somehow, a new fleet and not-cracked onlookers flocked to the site. Some people were filling their phones, while others were feeding them across the police line, turning the cliffs into a new internet hotspot. Amid the chaos, a woman's pet dog broke through the cordon, and soon a piercing wail came from inside the house. The crowd immediately erupted, speculating that the aliens had eaten the dog. Coupled with the previously discovered human corpse covered in bite marks, human anxiety was wildly escalating. At the same time, Sandra was also worried, as the alien infant she was raising became increasingly weak. To find out the specific reason, Sandra had no choice but to confide in George. She secretly recently an individual, and now there's a problem, urgently needing a blood test. Struggling to calm excitement, Do so to the wa and finally rose Sandra to the testing center, placing the cub's button to the testing hitman. Hi, the test results were surprising. The alien cub's body reduced almost new protein. Sandra's figured that a key factor is missing in the ribosome. However, George needed the other alien beings in a philosophy thriving. To find out the reason, the two decided to visit the temporary shelter for the alien beings. However, the level of activity and security was far beyond what they imagined, and George and Sandra couldn't get close. Sandra was unwilling to give up, and taking advantage of the guards' inattention, sneaked into the abandoned building from the back. But for some reason, the alien beings had already been secretly moved. She only saw a large number of strange symbols on the walls, clearly indicating that these aliens had their own civilization. Sandra surgically traces of light in the cone, with food residues left in the cookware. Upon careful examination, she recognized them as the glowing mushrooms from the sewers. This discovery excited Sandra immensely, as she believed these mushrooms were the key to the alien's healthy groove. The two searched the surrounding area repeatedly, and finally found a faintly glowing mushrooms in a drainage pipe. Sandra then immediately returned home, planning to feed the mushrooms to the alien infant. However, a blueprint strongly opposed this feeding behavior. No matter how Sandra explained, he always felt that the aliens had bad intentions. Eventually, the two had a big argument, which ended unpleasantly. Meanwhile, the female prime minister also received George's report, but she couldn't be bothered with what the aliens reading. Because Morgan's resist is meeting a breakthrough, this giant egg is not merely a biological entity, but an incredibly efficient bioenergy generator. No matter how much energy is released, it can recover on its own in a very short time, theoretically providing endless green energy for the entire Earth. Facing an artifact capable of reshaping the global economic landscape, the female prime minister knew that the Americans would not stand widely by, so she immediately issued a gag order. She believes this image the Shagwealth to Earth humanity, and she now become the prouder property of a few countries. Was unhappy, that is a word. At this moment, the CUE being troubled by a large number of alien juveniles. Experimental hunts show these creatures have semi-stormed the and can only completely kill by potent disinfectants. No one knows how many alien entities are still hidden in the forest. If a large-scale spraying of disinfectant is carried out, it will inevitably pollute the entire area's water supply and even threaten the health of tens of thousands of nearby residents. Just as the female prime minister was hesitant to suddenly receive a call from Professor Morgan, he insisted that the alien juveniles are highly aggressive and will pose a huge threat to our technology. If well dealt with quickly, the consequences being imaginable. The female prime minister hesitated repeatedly and finally approved Morgan's request. After receiving authorization, Dr. Morgan decided to first deal with the alien offspring in front of him. He poured a full bucket of gasoline into holding the young creatures, and the moment the flames united, a piercing scream echoed all around. Morgan went outside to see that the alien parent in the sky also let out a low wail, as if responding to the children's pain. At the reminder of this opportunity, Morgan turned his head in shock, and the giant egg was also emitting strong energy waves. Humanity's foolishness and arrogance have finally angered the extraterrestrial alive, and what kind of crazy revenge will it unleash? Friends who want to know the answer, please stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.